option that you have to react on Zoom. We are really excited to have you, and that we hope that you have a lot of questions that will be lined up for us as we engage in the discussion. So please feel free to link your questions in the chat, and we will get to those as soon as we begin to wrap up our discussion. So thank you for coming and having us on this discussion. To our three guest speakers, I'm going to start off our discussion and start with Ala. And I have a question to you related to how you've built your meaningful network in your career. And my question to you is, what advice do you have for building a meaningful international network, especially when starting out? And just to note everyone, Ala is an ALU alumni, which is very exciting for us because it helps us to see that this is someone we can aspire to be, because she's been where we are. And so we don't have to feel like this discussion is far-fetched, because we've brought a diverse range of people to be with us today. So Ala, I don't know if you'd like me to reiterate the question or if you're good to go.
I'm good to go. Thank you, Stacey.
Awesome.
Good morning, everyone. From wherever you're based, good morning, afternoon. My name is Ele, and I'm from Tunisia, and I moved to Rwanda in 2018, so that's almost 6 years ago. And I have a degree in International Business and Trade from ALU and graduated in 2022, so 2 years ago. Happy to be here and happy to share a bit of my experience with you all, and I hope we can all learn something together today in this beautiful morning. So
Yeah.
to your question, Stacey.
Yeah.
So how to build meaningful network and opportunities in international setting, and what are the channels to do that? So I think for me, the first piece of advice is to always be an initiative taker, and like the first to take initiative as young people. I know like some of us like feel as young people, we feel like, oh, we don't want to be doing these unpaid internships, or like
Yeah.
I don't want to be I don't want to be volunteering. But trust me, it works. It really does work, because you have a lot of gaps in your skills. You have a lot of knowledge to learn as a young person, and you have to learn about ways of thinking and ways of working, how the world works, and you need a mechanism and an environment to help you do that. And you have to be the first person to ask for help and to ask for that opportunity to come to you and to leverage it. So, be it volunteering in ALU, or like helping to set up an event, or helping your professor with writing a paper, or with some research, or even an event at the community, it really helps you build soft skills that you can't measure in the moment, but they will deem very helpful in your career.
Definitely.
My second piece of advice is definitely about showing up to these networking opportunities and experiences ready to offer something. That way you can shift the conversation from what are we here, what are we doing here? Is it just like small talk, or just getting to know your name that I'm not going to remember at the end of the event? Or is it about the value that we can exchange between us? And I think once the conversation becomes about value, you expect it to be at least short term or medium term, and hopefully long term, a long-term relationship with that person in a professional setting now. And then my final piece of advice would be about always being ready to introduce yourself in a meaningful way in any setting. So it's beyond your name, it's beyond your nationality and what you do in your position. I think always bringing an authentic piece of yourself. What are you passionate about? Okay, you work on a couple of projects in this industry, but why? Always introduce that why in the way you introduce yourself, because that is the hook to the other person that will keep them engaged in the discussion. If there is a common ground between both of you, trust me, that conversation will go a long way.
Yeah.
So the ways, like the channels you can help yourself with in starting a new career, I think I would categorize them in three categories. The first is online, the standard LinkedIn, and not just like the standard way of using LinkedIn, of sourcing
Yeah.
job opportunities or internships, but also seeking the events that you are interested in your career, in your passion, and honestly messaging random people for virtual coffee chats.
Definitely.
People love to talk about themselves,
Yeah.
and if you just shoot a message and you're like, hey, I really think I saw your profile and I think you have an amazing, stunning career, and I would love to learn your story.
Yeah.
People most of the time would come back to you with, hey, I have 30 minutes on this day to discuss this with you and I'm happy to see your enthusiasm. And
Mm.
more than often, those initiatives, those conversations, they will spark a new opportunity that you weren't aware of. So there is LinkedIn that you can use that way. There is ALU,
Yes.
and this is not in a cliche way, but I have benefited from a lot of opportunities that ALU offers you. For the alumni that are, for the students that are about to become alumni, there is the ALU mentorship, alumni mentorship program that
Mm.
connects you with individuals in your areas of interest. And
Right.
graduating from ALU with a thesis in circular food systems and circular practices for Rwanda's development, I was
Yeah.
connected with the CEO of Footprints Africa, who's based in Ghana and who's building a huge initiative for documenting circular practices around Africa. And using that opportunity, just sourcing through my emails, alumni emails, I got connected to this great person who connected me to another coach that I'm engaged with right now in a 6-month mentorship program. So it's amazing for you to leverage, just start by leveraging ALU opportunities for networking that can make a huge difference in your life.
Yeah.
And then there is in-person events happening in Kigali that you need to be aware of, like Chillest After Work for networking. And there's Founders Friday at Norskin, and many other events that are happening in the city. Um, I hope I didn't talk too much, but let
Oh,
me know.
definitely. It's really incredible to see that this is being some things that you're applying in your real life. And so we can't say that you spoke too much. And one thing that I'm noticing, a thread that I'm noticing in everything you said, is the boldness that you need when you're doing networking. You spoke a lot about how you need to take initiative, just the willingness to be humble enough to start from zero, even those unpaid internships you're speaking about. It's very important. But I'm really glad that you've highlighted some of these things. And so we're going to allow our next speaker to also speak about some of the same question and from their own perspective so that we can begin to build on what we feel are the most meaningful ways to build our international networks. So Willow, would you like to share more about how you've done this in your own career?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Willow for those who are joining, and I'm currently in Ghana. I work as head of commercial operations at work. We are basically a agriculture service company here, and we are here in Sierra Leone. I would say, like, starting out, first of all, I'll admit that I never plan actually to go international work outside of my country, meaning that I was born in Congo, and then I went to school in United States, and I got straight after college, I got a job in United States. So I planned that after I get like 3 years of experience in the US, I'll go back to Congo. So I've never imagined that I'll decide where I went to school in Congo, I'll be in another country. So I've never actually really planned about these things. But I would say though, for starting out, it's likely that you don't have a lot of network unless you were lucky to be born in a well-connected family. So if you are starting out as a student, I would say like the best place to begin actually is around school. Like most schools have like career services. They have like events like this, for example, right? Imagine if I get, for example, LinkedIn, we talked about LinkedIn connection after this. It's much, much easier if you are part of this event to connect to me versus someone who just randomly connect to me, right? So For me, I would start, like, especially if you don't have connection, I start places where I have access to, and that is this event at colleges, at your campus, in your town, and then online, right? So also look about, start where your interests are, right? So like, what kind of problems do you want to solve, or what career you're trying to do? Most likely that you have people that also have some type of group, right? And it's much easier to go and fit with people who have similar interests than you. So I will start there and then build from there.
Mm. Definitely. From what you've both said, there's this element of the dots connecting eventually. Like, you don't really know where it's going to go, but when you begin to like spread out your wings and you connect with Willow and you connect with Madison, and then one day you realize, oh, now I'm in Madison's network. So thank you, Willow, for highlighting how there's a need for us to begin where we are, and then it will actually go out, and then you begin to see your network actually growing. Thank you for sharing also about your background and how you didn't even, one thing that you said that was really interesting was that you didn't expect to actually become international. So also, I think I'm also getting that there's need to just be open to see where actually these things would take you. So thank you for highlighting that. Last but not least, Madison, I would like to hear more about your perspective about what we're speaking about, building meaningful international networks.
Thank you, Stacey. Alay and Willow really covered things really well. I guess the only point I would like to add to that is around expanding your network. So once you do have those insights into your first degree connections, so either if that's like school alumni or people from your town, I would always follow up coffee chats with asking that individual if they know of anyone else who might be a good connection for you. So whether that's your interest is in agriculture or a specific organization, they might be able to help you connect with others. And that's sort of like the second degree connection. Also, this is quite a bold ask, and it took me a while to be comfortable doing this, but I found that when you come to people with specific asks, so whether if that's understanding more about an industry or a company or an interest in trying to find an internship, people are really willing to help you. And I think giving them a direction to go into is helpful because that gives them a little bit of an insight on why you want to talk to them. And that's been really useful in my network. And yeah, I'll end there and yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Madison. I think like the thing that you all spoke about is how people need to recognize value. Like instead of just going into the network without saying what it is that, not what you want to gain, but where you are, it helps people to be able to help you to get where you want to be. So I really appreciated how you both emphasized that among the need for us to be willing to learn, because we don't really, there's a lot of gaps like one of you actually mentioned. So thank you for highlighting that, all of you. And I hope that we're all taking notes in the in the chat there. So I'm going to go back to Madison, and I'd like you to start us off on our next question. And so my question for you is, how have your connections, the ones that you've made abroad, impacted your career, and what are some key ways to nurture these connections over time?
That's such a good question. And I think it really speaks to where your career can go. So when I first started university, I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. And so I was really focused in the sciences and in biology. But actually through networking and just talking to people, I've really expanded my viewpoint of what like makes for a successful and impactful career. And that sort of made me transition into more systems change, especially around agriculture. And that's really where I found my niche. And I don't think I would have gotten there if I hadn't been curious and reaching out to alumni and people in the field to really gain that understanding. And I remember in those first days, I really tried to attend as many panels and information sessions as I could at my university, and then also started to reach out on LinkedIn and understand what the possibilities are in the world. Because at least in my family, I come from a first generation college family, so I'm first in my family to go to college. I think success is always defined by the typical doctor, lawyer, CEO pathways, and I've really realized that the world is so much wider than that, and there's so many different ways that you can make an impact and have a very successful career. And then jumping into the second part of that question, continuing over time to nurture connections is also very important. So anybody that I've reached out into the past, I try to keep up to date every once in a while. So I actually have a spreadsheet, which is a little bit type A, I think, of who I've talked to in the past, and sort of the insights I've gotten from them. And I also know if they have any specific interests, and every once in a while, between like 3 months to a year, I'll check in and just give them an update as to where I am in my career, or share with them an interesting article, and that really helps to cultivate those relationships. And one final point, I think networking for your career is really about the long game. And so you really want to make sure that you're keeping those connections up to date, because you never know when you can help somebody or when somebody can help you.
Definitely. And you see, like one thing I'm noticing is that these relationships are not meant to be transactional. So what you said about the spreadsheet, it shows that like Allah had said, it's less about what you can get sometimes and just understanding what it is that you can actually give back in the relationship. So thank you for highlighting that. It was also very interesting how you wanted to be a doctor at first. I wouldn't have guessed that, like, and I think one thing that you've highlighted in what you said is that the networks that you've built helped to help you expand your interest. And that's one thing that we would also like to hammer in this discussion, that you never know what you unlearn or relearn through the networks that you build. We're going to move on to Willow, and the question is still the same. I don't know if you'd like me to reiterate, but basically what we're looking into is how have the connections that you've made abroad impacted your career, and how are the ways that you nurture these connections over time?
Yeah, I mean, like I say earlier, I was in the United States, and I knew that I'm coming back to Congo. I just didn't know. I studied computer science, and I was a software engineer there.
Right.
And I knew for sure that coming back to Congo, the software engineer, you could probably do something, but not at a scale, like the large scale, because I was also trying to look to make big impact at scale, right? So,
right.
And I was just thinking through, like, what could I actually do with this degree? And one of my friends, actually a Rwandese who live in Congo Brazzaville, was part of the PIF, and was like, hey man, since you don't know what to do, why don't you just spend this 1 year and go and try to figure out even if returning to Africa is an option for you, because many people want to return, but you are not sure. You've lived here for like, I don't know, 12 years. And so I applied actually, and obviously worked out, because I ended up at the organization that I did fellowship with, and I chose to stay with afterward. So it just showed that you have to be really, really open about these things, and especially talking also about problems that you want to solve, right? So like this is how people link you to opportunity, right? It's like knowing what you're interested in, and be vocal about it, right? So that's how. And how do I basically update people. I try as much as possible to update people on maybe skills that I've gained since we talked, or something, or a book that I've read that remind me of people that we've met in the past, all of these things. So it doesn't have to be really career related. It could be like you read, like, I don't know, a book that reminds you, and you just say, hey, this time I was reading this book, and it really reminded me of you because of this and this and this, right? And then that's how you basically keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us that really great answer. You said you've given how you're doing it, how you're nurturing these connections. Please, could you add which platform you're communicating with your network?
Yeah, professionally, primarily emails,
Okay.
right? So, and then sometimes direct messages on LinkedIn. Like professionally, I try to put as much as possible through those channels. But also I post a lot about my work, mostly about pictures on Instagram. Okay. So yeah.
Thank you so much. One thing that I really loved about what you said is that it was one person in your network who led to the rest of that year. They shaped the rest of the year for you. So you never really know, again, who it is that's going to be the next thing for you. And that's the reason why we need to be open, like you're saying, to what your network actually has to say. And another thing is the fact that when you continuously say what you're passionate about, I'm sure all of our speakers have mentioned it, saying it over and over again, people will begin to know that, okay, she's the person to go to for this. So thank you so much, Willow, for highlighting that again. Ala, please could you also share lastly about what you think are some key ways to nurture these relationships and the impact that they've had on you, on your career?
Yeah, I think I can't add much to what Madison and Willow have shared. I think a good practice that I found is to share what they're interested in, like articles or opportunities in LinkedIn with them. I think people look for that all the time. And also, when you interact with someone, you ask them, how can I keep in touch, or what else do you want to learn from me? For example, with my mentor in Footprints Africa, she told me, let me know if you know of any funding opportunities for organizations like ours in Africa to expand to other countries. They want funding for expansion. So now I'm keeping an eye on LinkedIn for such opportunities to share with her. I think that's the only thing I would add to the conversation here.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think what you said also about how you can add to them. You know, people feel less like, oh, I'm just here to get things. And I think also understanding that these people are human beings. So they just want to feel valued, and then you also feel valued in the relationship is also a really great point. So thank you so much for that one. We're going to go back to Willow. And so the question that I have for you is what are some local networking opportunities that we may easily overlook because of our primary focus on building relationships for careers abroad?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think locally there are just a lot of events that may not seem like would lead to something, but might actually work out just perfectly fine. Okay, think about, for example, an event by One Acre Fund in Rwanda, right? It might not seem as much because One Acre Fund is big in Rwanda, but they're also in Zambia, for example, then Tanzania and everything, right? So you might ignore that because One Acre is just in Rwanda, but they have other offices in other places, so that could lead somewhere. There is a lot, especially for those who are studying, for example, like the people that in STEMs, there's a lot about coding boot camps, for example. They're about coding competitions, like go to that, show up to those things. They might look really, really small because they are organized by, I don't know, by someone in your class or something like this. But it could be an opportunity that leads you to much, much bigger places, right? And then typically also the local embassies, sometimes they have like a business competitions and stuff like this. I think I would start to, those are really, really great opportunity to start. So for me, I think it's all about starting where you are and then you expand from there, because most likely if you show up at these events, there are going to be someone who has done something beyond that local community that you are currently in. So for me, it's always start with where you are. So those local community events, I will start there. That's how I'll say. I'll not overlook those because those are easy actually to access anyway. Sure. Right? It's much harder to show up this big networking event. They might charge you, for example, but these local ones are typically free. So I'll start there. I'll say those. Don't overlook those.
Definitely. Thank you, Awoke, for highlighting that. Start where you are is the point that we are going to hammer on again. Willow, I'd like to find out, how did you identify the local opportunity?
Yeah, so I mean, it's for me, like I started out, I was in Seattle, Washington, and Seattle is really, really big on tech. Like the headquarters of Microsoft is there, the headquarters of Amazon is there. There's a huge presence of Google, for example. And I was in computer science. So there was a lot of program to get people to go into STEMs and internships. So the way I studied is basically, I actually studied in high school, actually. So basically Microsoft came to our high school and they were looking for people who know basic coding. And I showed up, this was like at 4, our school ended like at 3 or something, or 2 or something like this. And I waited until 4 and they showed up, everyone that was there. We did an interview, we did a small challenge with coding. And so I ended up with an internship in high school at Microsoft. And of course, after I went to college, I had internship with Microsoft, and eventually I got a job with Microsoft after I finished college, right? So it's always about, for me, I think my pathway has always been about the local opportunity that you're offered, right? So for me, it started that way. I mean, it was really, really easy because the ecosystem for me was there for computer science. If you study computer science, was really, really easy. So it might not be the case for you, but I believe if you do start locally with what you have, eventually you get somewhere where you want to go.
Thank you so much. Those are really valuable points. And just hammering again on the point that, it's easy to not see value. There's a saying that says a hero is without honor in his own home country, which means that it's easier to look for value outside than to see it within from yourself. So, Willow, what you said about starting from the inside and then going out, be it with your skills and even with your network, is something that I hope that the students are able to take home from this. Madison, could you please also share your views on how you also managed to leverage your local networking opportunities and how where you actually found them in your network?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Willow highlighted a lot on the formal networking opportunities, and those are all very good places to start. I think what was surprising to me is how many informal networking opportunities they are. I feel very lucky in my professional career that I'm very passionate about agriculture and youth. And so I tend to talk about those two topics quite a lot just in my everyday life, which leads to a lot of informal networking opportunities just with friends and acquaintances I met. And I'd like to share an anecdote, not about me, but about a friend who actually got his most recent job at a dinner party, just talking about his passions around design. So really just don't know where these networking opportunities can come from. And they don't have to feel transactional. It's just about showing your genuine interest for the topics and the places you want to work in your career. So I definitely would be sure to share those passions with your friends and acquaintances as well.
Yeah, definitely. The genuineness, when you were speaking about that, I'm just seeing that genuineness, not just presenting a friend on LinkedIn, but just having a life that transcends even the professional sphere is something that we can leverage in our local networks. Thank you so much, Madison, for that. And Ala, could you please also highlight how you've also managed to tap into your local networks and how we could overlook those?
Yeah. Actually, I have an excellent example for that because only by leveraging a local network that I'm here and came here to study at ALU in Rwanda. So around 2015 or 2016, I was like starting to get engaged in civil society and like volunteering with the Red Crescent back home in Tunisia and working with Junior Chamber International for local events and just events around the city. And then I also joined the American Corner in Tunisia, where there was a presentation about the Andisha Prize, which is this, I think, entrepreneurship competition organized by ALA. And we were just there for the presentation. Me and my twin sister, we went there for the presentation of this competition. It happens that the admissions officer for ALA for North Africa was in that event. And he asked me and my sister to come to ALA's finalist event selection. We almost made it to ALA, but we didn't. We did apply, but we didn't. And we did like the test and everything, but we didn't make it. Other people did. And then he offered to write a recommendation letter for me to go on an exchange year in the United States the following year. And I did, thanks to his recommendation. And he told me, once you come back, think about ALU. There is a new campus opening in Rwanda. And that's how I ended up, after finishing my exchange year in the US, to apply to ALU. And it happens that there was a scholarship, the Mandela Scholarship that year. And that's how I'm actually here in Rwanda today. Thanks to that, just attending a local event in Tunisia in 2016 to be able to be here today. So you never know when the opportunity comes.
Thank you, Ala. It's really incredible to see how this has come to be. And it's because like one thing happened which led to the next thing. And I would have thought that, you'd see the failure and be like, oh, this is over. But something then came out of it. So just the point that failure may not actually be failure sometimes. It's a door, you never know what door is being opened or closed, but just the openness that you had to continuously go to the next thing, seek the recommendation, apply to ALU. It's really inspiring to see. So thank you so much for highlighting that. So we're going to move on to our next question, and I'm going to go back to Madison. And so the question I have for you is, can you share an example where networking played a key role in advancing your career?
That's a great question. So I'm actually a relative newcomer to One Acre Fund. I've been at the organization for 3 months. So that's all to say that I've just went through a very extensive networking and job hunting process this past year. I was previously at the International Livestock Research Institute in Nairobi, which was an amazing place to begin. But really, I was looking to pivot from the research side of agriculture to more of an implementation and project management work. So I really wanted to leverage my network in that process. And my first step was really just to see who in my network was working in this field and perhaps what sort of organizations or companies could align with those goals that I had. And really through conversations is how I came to the One Acre Fund. I noticed the One Acre Fund really aligned with my values, and I noticed that I had a second degree connection with a connection on LinkedIn. So I asked for her to reach out to the other connection if they would be willing to chat with me about their experience. And they were. We hopped on a call, a 30-minute quick chat. And she shared with me her experiences and that they were hiring for a new role that was project management focused on youth engagement. And yeah, that's how I ended up at the One Acre Fund, just purely through networking and really being interested about what people in my network were doing. So I would highly recommend anybody in the job hunt to really just look at who in your network is doing what and who they know as well. You never know where it could lead.
Thank you, Madison. I really like how you began to treat your job hunting such as your 9 to 5. It's something that I would also tell anybody who's looking for a job. It's really a job in itself. And the cold messages, the cold emails, the cold LinkedIn messages, I think that's a really great point to put out there. You were really bold to go out there and just ask them to do that, and it's led you to here. So thank you so much for highlighting that. It's tough because it's very easy to think, oh, people don't have time. But your testimony is a really great example of how if you try, you never know. So Willow, would you also like to share about the same thing, how your networking has played a role in you advancing your career?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I ended up in Ghana actually through like my friend shared that, hey, you can apply because you don't know what you want to go back to Africa to do.
Right.
Try either do there's this PIF, Princeton in Africa Fellowship. It's just 1 year. If you don't like it, you can come back. If you like it, and you'll find you have a much bigger network to branch into something new, right? So I applied and got it, and luckily I got into agriculture company and worked really well, because at the end of the fellowship we were just about to change our business model and we were not sure if it's going to work. And so the CEO was like, hey man, instead of going back to America, why don't you go and try to make this thing happen, right? So and I thought like I'm going to be 1 extra year, but I've been here more than 3 years. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. And that's how like network play a huge role into being in Ghana at the moment.
And thank you for highlighting that. Again, I see advice. Someone gave you advice, you took it, and now you're here. So thank you for highlighting that also. There's a common thread here of different people playing a role. Like building a career is not something that you can do by yourself. It's something that you've all brought out, and it's something that is continuously being emphasized by everything that you're saying. So I'd like to also find out from Ala what you think on this particular question.
Yeah, I think harnessing those connections really help you build up your career, especially with recommendations for future jobs or for future opportunities. Like, I know my previous professor at ALU, Rudy, who works at One Acre Fund as well right now. We have a really good relationship in terms of connecting over opportunities in climate, in circular food systems.
Right.
And he was my internship advisor in 2020. We were doing ALU's economic impact on the special economic zone. And then we used some of that research to co-author a paper about the environmental impact for ALU. And that's how we kept on engaging on opportunities that are within our shared interests. And to this day, he writes my recommendation letters for grad school or for jobs. I just got a new job in June with Impact for Health, and he was the one who wrote my recommendation for that. So definitely double down on the people that share your interests and are always happy to guide you and support you on your journey, because they know that we all had to start from that same point.
Definitely. And thank you. Like you said, when we started, there are people who are there who are willing to help. And so that's something that you've continuously highlighted in your whole career journey. So thank you for sharing. We're going to move on to our next question, and I'd like to direct it to Willow first. And so my question to you is, what skills do you believe are essential for succeeding in global roles, and how can professionals cultivate?
Yeah, I think for me there is two skills. It doesn't, and I think this doesn't matter what industry or sector you are in, actually. On one side, you need to be able to think clearly. And part of why it's important to think clearly is because it helps you solve problems, right? So you need to be able to think clearly, and that build into solving problem. If you know how to solve problem, you are basically marketable, right? So the second skills that I think it's really, really important is writing well, actually. Right. So this is really, really important. And I know, like, coming from, I actually studied computer science because I did not like to do writing papers in college. And it was far less paper in computer science than like economics, for example. And so I ended up but it's actually a huge, important skill to know how to write well. In any sector, whether that is in computer science, think about documentation. If you're doing, if you're trying to solve a problem in computer science and the documentation is not well written, it creates a huge headache for you, right? So the same thing, if you want to learn a new sector for you, for example, you're working in agriculture, you want to go into here, if you read something that is written very, very, really, really important to know how to think well and then express those in writing, because it's a skill that many people don't have, right? And so how do you go about building these skills, right? You solve problems, right? You solve problems and then you write. You write and read people who know how to write, right? So you can take what they've spend so much time perfecting and start incorporating in your own skills. That's how you go about building it. Like, if you want to build how to solve problem solving skills, you have to solve problems. This can be in anything, right? So if you're like studying art, for example, or I don't know, interior design, do you show up in Kigali airport and start looking everything that is wrong with that airport in terms of design and stuff like this, right? So it could be any sector. You can think that in agriculture, you show up on a farm and start measuring, like, what's the spacing between this maize and this maize, for example, right? So it's largely applicable to everything. So and I'll say that's how I think those are the most important skills that I would say.
Thank you, Willow. That's very important. And I've noticed that even for myself. So thank you for highlighting those skills, writing and problem solving. And Madison, would you like to add any skills that you think are also important?
Sure. I'll take this in a slightly different direction, focusing on when you do have that internship or your job. I'd really encourage everybody in those first few months to really just take a step back and obviously contribute how you can and do really well at your job, but also observe and learn
Yeah,
from those in the company who's been there for longer than you. I think it's really, really key to gain those insights on how companies operate and how what success looks like in the company. And I found just by having many coffee chats with my new colleagues and observing, it's really helped me progress.
oh yeah, definitely. And we can always learn more when we, recognize that we have gaps and be willing to observe others, to teach us. And last but not least, Ala, could you please also let us know what you think?
I think for global roles, and I'm not gonna say a specific skill, but maybe a principle or a value, if you will.
Mm.
Three, to reiterate what Madison said, just being humble,
Oh
really,
yeah. Yeah.
being humble, and
Yeah.
listen, because we're all gonna shine at some point.
Oh yeah, it's true.
But take your time with it and observe.
Mm.
The second is about empathy. If you're taking a global role, you're dealing with a lot of diverse backgrounds and people who don't think the same way as you, didn't grow up the same way as you. So you need to be empathetic and be able to develop the skill of putting yourself in the shoes of other people to
Yeah.
understand where they come from. And finally, I think curiosity, just being curious to know why they think that way and why they bring that idea to the table and how can we do things differently. Just being curious about that possibility is really exciting and driving for global roles, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Humility. I think it's definitely important. And everything that you've said, the genuineness of knowing, trying to build that understanding of where different people come from is very important. As we close our conversation, I'd like to come back to you, Ala, as we close, to just provide a bit of a one sentence, a short phrase of what advice you would give to someone just beginning to pursue an international career in today's changing landscape. Just a few words of encouragement, maybe, or advice.
I think being consistent
Yeah.
to relationship building, it's very important to keep up. And I reiterate, I think I will borrow the idea of Madison of the spreadsheet. It's a good idea. Just to
Yeah.
keep track of when you can reach out to a person again and connect with them.
Yeah.
Consistency is important so that people don't feel like you're taking advantage of them, and you only reach out when you need them. But again, like reiterating also the idea of being an initiative taker and being consistent with it. And don't feel entitled to get help back. Don't feel entitled to get help back. You always be the giver of your time, of your effort. If it's not reciprocated long term, then maybe that's when you realize you need to stop that connection because
Yeah.
you're being taken advantage of. But if you give something, you realize that you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
If you give time for someone, you're doing it for yourself, not for that person. And that I think will keep you having healthy relationships with your connections.
That's
These
true.
are two final tips of advice: consistency and not being entitled to help.
Definitely. Yeah, understanding that it's not why are you doing it is the real reason. You're not doing it to get anything back. You're doing it for yourself. So thank you for mentioning that. Willow, what piece of advice would you give to someone who's also beginning their career?
Yeah, I think two. One is that you can look at where you want to go and look at people who've been through that journey, for example, and begin there, like reach out to them. Obviously, you want to be really, really professional about how you reach to them. And then just be humble when if it doesn't work out and then continue, right? So that's one, right? It's likely that if you send a request for 30 people, maybe two might come back, right? And just recognize that it's nothing personal. It's not because you don't deserve it or anything like this. It's just like the way things goes, right? Second is that especially the people that are graduating, just look, it could be that you start with internship or fellowship, for example, and not directly the job, right? So the job market is very, very competitive as it is. And I found that it's slightly less competitive with internship or fellowship. And of course, because I'm a PIF, I think now they do take some people from Africa that are educated in Africa. I think there's a hybrid, so it could be an opportunity that you could try, and you begin there. It's much easier. I would say like it's much easier when you are in and try to either stay at the company that you are in or try to transition in something than like starting from scratch. So that's what I was saying.
Thank you so much for mentioning those really crucial points. It's so true to just be willing to try even if it doesn't work out. Just that humility again, like Allah was talking about. And lastly, Madison, do you have a short piece of advice that you would give to anybody beginning their career?
Yeah, I'd say be yourself and be genuinely curious about learning from others. I think passion and that genuine curiosity goes a long way in conversations. So yeah, just always bring that to the table with you. And then a bit more practical, I think gratitude also goes a long way. So whenever you have an interview or just a coffee chat or any sort of interaction with somebody else, always follow up with a thank you note and just maybe a high level takeaway you took away. People really do appreciate that gratitude.
Yeah, definitely. And even after you've achieved some results, then going back to them and telling them what has happened. So thank you so much for highlighting that. So that has been our discussion about leveraging networking for global careers. And throughout our discussion, there was a couple of themes that ran through everything that all our speakers were saying. And some of those include being open-minded, staying visible, sharing your passions with the people around you, starting from your interests, starting from zero, being willing to start from where you are and then moving that to go outside into the world and shine. And the genuineness in our conversations, the boldness to start conversations with people we don't even know, and being yourself and being humble. I created a bit of a circle, and imagine yourself as a circle in the middle and the world around you just being there ready for you to take it if you're willing to be able to put in practice the things that you've mentioned. And lastly, consistency. So those are the many things that the speakers have spoken about that we can all leverage to be able to begin or to expand the networking for our global careers. Now we're going to open it up for questions to the audience. We have about 7 minutes for questions. So I think we could either put them in the chat or maybe someone could raise their hand and ask. Yeah. I don't know if we have any questions. Let me check. Yes, don't be shy. Please don't be shy to ask any questions that you have in the chat. I'm not seeing any yet.
You guys have been so thorough that everybody's like, oh, wow.
I think we covered so many things. I think if someone was taking notes, this would have been good. I don't think they would miss anything. I'm not sure if there's any questions, but if there are none, I will go ahead and ask, because I'm a student and I'm trying to make it. So, anybody? You can just even unmute and just go ahead and ask.
Can I just say something as we wait for questions?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I reckon that this conversation might be a bit overwhelming for students who think that they need to find themselves at a point where they figured everything out. And honestly, we might talk like we have things figured out, but I personally don't. Like, I'm trying out things. I tried 3 different degrees in 3 different countries to settle on ALU, and that requires risk taking and just like playing with resistance and trying to figure out what you want to do and taking risks. And some people back home, they're like, "Oh, you're wasting your time. Like 2 years, you could have done another master's degree." And sometimes you're just lost. You don't know what you want to do, So please don't feel overwhelmed of, oh, these people have their shit together. No, we don't.
Yeah, thank you
Sorry.
Thank you so much. You know about the point about applying to AOU. I applied to 50 schools before came here, so I think I get you. So there's some questions in the chat. Muhammad has said, what are some common mistakes people make when networking, and how can they avoid them? Maybe one of you could just go at it and give a few pointers. Yes, Madison.
I can add something really quickly, and I think Willow alluded to this in one question, but not taking networking too personally because people might just be busy and not have the time to talk to you, but really just trying to keep trucking along. You'll have some hits, you'll have some misses, and that's okay. It's just part of the journey.
Yeah, and I see this question is a theme running through the chat. Nagasaro had also asked some mistakes that people have made when networking, and so it's a really it's a pitfall. We think, oh, they haven't responded, so they don't care, but it's not that deep. So I see another question. It's from Emma, and she's asked, can you explain more for us about Princeton Africa?
Yeah, Princeton in Africa is basically a fellowship that is available it's a 1-year fellowship. And I think it's more relevant maybe to talk about Nexus here. Is that correct, Liv?
Mm.
Yeah, so traditionally used to be like for people who are educated on American university, and then
Right.
they get sent to America, to Africa, and they get paired with one of the organization in Africa continent, and they basically work for 1 year with that organization, providing different, it could be M&E, it could be anything. But now actually it's open to people who are educated on African continents, and it's called this. So it will be really, really interesting. I don't know if we can drop their link here so you can learn more. But I think it would be a really, really cool program, especially for students here to try it, because it can open a lot of doors, right? So
Oh yeah.
it did for me, right? So that's why I'm mentioning it.
Talking of networking, I will add Madison and Willow, they're in my network because of Princeton in Africa, because I also was a fellow. So see, you can find really cool people that agree to be on panels for you on a Friday. So thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both, and even Livia, for just giving a further example of networking in action. And Eric has mentioned many times networking seems quite awkward, especially at the start. How can you move past that stage? Maybe just a few words for him. Thank you, Ab.
It's going to feel cringe, and you have to accept that. Trust me. There are some events. There are some events where I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? You're just feeling very, very, very cringe.
Yeah.
And just reminding yourself that you don't have to set expectations for every event. Actually, setting expectations for networking events is what will reinforce that cringe feeling of I'm not making something out of this opportunity. And just not setting expectations, just flowing and going there, introducing yourself and what you're passionate about. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So, but sit with that feeling of cringe and acknowledge that it's part of the process. And it will always be. As you get higher in the corporate ladder or like in your career, there will always be more people like humbling you, and you're feeling cringe of what are you saying at this point. So that's totally normal. Acknowledge that and accept that.
Thank you for that response. It's true. I mean, you don't know the person. So there's no way to get through it. You just have to go through. So we know that our time has come to a close. So for any other questions that you may have, please feel free to connect with the speakers. Ask them the questions. This is your opportunity to start out those cold messages, send them the question that you had, and begin to practice what we've spoken about. So we've come to the end of our panel discussion. I hope that we all managed to take away a lot of things, and I've kind of given you a summary of what we've spoken about. And I'm really excited to see how we're all going to start to use the things that we've learned and start to implement them in our, networking opportunities. Thank you all. And I'll give it back to Livia.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Stacey, for some wonderful moderation. And thank you to all our speakers for their insights. I have learned a lot myself. So thank you so much. And thank you for giving your time to this. And, like networking opportunities are everywhere, as Ella said, like AOU, something is happening all the time. Patrick here is on the call. He's from the Student Professional Development team. You receive a lot of invites about anything from one-on-ones to go over your resume to opportunities for panels like this. Same for my team and Awoke's team. We host a lot of visiting experts and visiting faculty from all over the world. Make sure you come to those events. It's 1 hour of your day, come to one of the sessions in person, hang around at the end to chat with them. You never know what could come out of that conversation. You might find a new passion because this person spoke about a topic that you hadn't previously thought of. Go abroad if you get the opportunity. Awoke organizes amazing signature immersive experiences that are open to all AOU students. So use the opportunities that you have. And if you have, any questions or concerns, just remember that, and this is what's come out of the panel for me, there's always going to be someone that is willing to have a chat with you. And if it's not the first person you reach out to because they ghost you on LinkedIn, try the next. Sometimes they're not really ghosting, they're just busy. So don't stress, trust the process. I think, Ella said, it might not make sense right now, but it may make sense after, the path is always clear when you look back. So trust the process. And thank you everyone again for an amazing panel and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Right. So
Thanks, everyone.
My hands with Livia and the rest of the team to also say thank you, our great panelists, for this wonderful conversation. I really took down a lot of notes. Humility, being open and bringing value, and being consistent about what you're looking for and staying open to it. And of course, starting from ground one or ground zero, if you like. So all of that are wonderful things. I believe our students have learned. I've learned a lot, and we'll definitely keep in touch. Livia, do you want to share the exit ticket? I believe.
I will send it. Thanks. I just put it in the chat. I will send it via email to everyone. So please take a few minutes to fill out the feedback form. It really helps us know what kind of events we should do. And also to our speakers, stay tuned.